Où tu veux, Brenda?
Ouais.
Oui, parfait. C'est juste, je veux juste Laurie puis Céleste,
Ok.
chaque côté.
I'll swear on your sides. I'm with the woman.
Shh.
Okay, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Laurie Manzer, veteran and advocate for medical cannabis, and Dr. Celeste Thirlwell, psychiatrist, who will talk to you in just a few seconds about their perspective and understanding about the challenges veterans are confronted to regarding medical cannabis. They are the specialists. As for me, I am Jenny Migneault. You might remember me as the vet spouse who ran after Minister Fentino in 2014. Back then, as a spouse and as a caregiver, I just wanted to save my husband from his unnecessary suffering. As I was completely powerless between the impacts of the numerous pills he was prescribed, his anger at Veterans Affairs Canada for treating him like a liar, forcing him to constantly fight for the truth to be recognized, and for making unjustified, unfair, and ridiculous decisions that ended up preventing his healing process from happening for years, and created so much additional pain and suffering to him and to our 4 children, our entire family. All he wanted was his suffering to stop, and he was desperate for help that would make sense to him. As his wife, I was the only one he trusted, and yet I had no identity for anyone who should have been listening. As his caregiver, he gave me a voice, but those who were supposed to help silenced me, ignored me, until I drowned myself. We divorced a couple of years ago, and as of today, we both blame Veterans Affairs for the failure of our lives together because he was denied from the services and the benefits he was entitled to. And more importantly, what he needed to be better and to have a quality of life. Him, myself, our 4 children, us, we were abandoned, and we are the result of the process. After our marriage, I blame Veterans Affairs too. Even more when I lived 6 months in my car myself. So it is when I fully realized the extent of everything that is missing for someone who ends up impacted by the financial dependency, the transfer of PTSD, and the caregiver fatigue. We have nothing. Today, as an advocate, I fight for the identity and the dignity of family members through support, education, and financial recognition. I fight for PTSD to be recognized fairly for what it really is, an invalidating wound. This is why I'm joining my voice to Laurie Manzer and Celeste Thirlwell today. As a member of the Veterans Affairs Family Advisory Committee, I recognize the delay, deny, indict, bureaucratic version of dealing with advocates and those committees. Politically, we are not listened to, not considered, not included, and yet we could be part of a solution. These committees were created to look good, and we are part of a circus trying to convince Canadians that veterans and their families are well taken care of. Don't be fooled. Canadians have to acknowledge the extent of the impacts of this broken system on both the veteran community and their families. Why is it that veterans and families somehow ended up as political issues? I am not the desperate vet spouse I was back then, but every day I hear the despair, the anger, the need for hope, the impact of the misinformation and the result of the absence of information, the collateral damage that shouldn't be, the isolation, the financial inability to make a change, the caregiver fatigue, the impacts on too many children who are the forgotten among the forgotten. I can't talk on behalf of the veterans community about the numerous challenges they are confronted to from a political, legal, and bureaucratic perspective. But let me tell you something. There are valid reasons why they file lawsuits, class actions, while they feel betrayed by the future, new pension for life, why we hear the word mefloquine assistant dogs, equine therapy, more and more. This is why we are here today to talk about their access to their medication. It wouldn't take much to make a significant change and prevent many of the suicides. But nothing is coherent. En bon québécois, les bottines ne marchent pas avec les babines. When Prime Minister Trudeau stated that certain veterans are asking more than we can give as a country, it was shocking. Considering the millions of dollars spent into fighting veterans in court and through its own bureaucratic system called the Veterans Review and Appeal Board, considering the delay, deny, and die Veterans Affairs way of treating veterans, considering that we are aware of money unspent, short changes on pension and disability awards, and reduction of programs such as medical cannabis. As a caregiver, as an advocate, and as a member of the Veterans Affairs Family Advisory Committee, I'm wondering if Mr. Trudeau's statement also included the families of wounded veterans. Because back in 2015, families were promised $100 million annually, yet the new caregiver recognition benefit launched last April is designed to be perfectly and absolutely inaccessible for any veterans wounded with PTSD or any other mental injury. To access it, a caregiver is required to actually physically wash, feed, and dress a wounded veteran. The result? The same despair I was in 2014. In that regard, nothing has changed. Same as when a veteran needs someone to accompany him. So Veterans Affairs will recognize, a neighbor, a stranger to accompany a veteran, and this person will be able to receive from Veterans Affairs an amount of $110 a day for all the expenses. Now, this measure is not effective for someone who is a wife and a child of a wounded veteran. So again, there is a political disconnect about what is being said and what the reality truly is. Are families and caregivers asking more than we can give, Mr. Trudeau? As a country, we do have a responsibility. For my ex-husband, if medical cannabis would have been accessible sooner to him, I am convinced it would have saved our marriage. I will never forget his battle for his voice to be heard regarding his own healing. The biggest battle of his life concerned his own recovery. While he knew that cannabis really helped him cope with his mental and physical pain, he kept being degraded and diminished by his health specialist at the OSI Clinic of Sainte-Anne-de-Bellevue, although medical cannabis was available through Veterans Affairs. So on one hand, it was available, but on the other hand, he was treated and considered like a drug user, which was really not helping, and it was more painful into our home. Let's say that his health specialist would have worked with him instead. It would have allowed him to attend family meetings, to attend a child's play at school, enjoy a meal in a restaurant. The therapeutic efforts would have made sense. He would have been free sooner from the numbing effects of the numerous pills he was forced to take. It would have prevented us from asking my 15-year-old son to go get cannabis in the streets because it was not available and not accessible to him. All of us, but more importantly, my veteran, would have lived more social successes. It would have prevented his suicide attempt. I would have prevented him from dissociation and running 25 kilometers into the wood at night. He would have been sooner the man he is today. As a caregiver, I would have been less a caregiver and more of a wife. We could have been more of a family. We all lost everything. Time can be a powerful healer, but it can also be a silent killer. And our government and Veterans Affairs are killing us with their false political love. Laurie Manzer.
Thank you, Jenny. I have to grab my notes. Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse my faux pas. My brain doesn't work at the best of times, and my notes couldn't even make it up to the podium. And I want to say this isn't scripted. My palms, if you could see them, actually have water on them. That's how much things like this affect me. I can normally talk about these things without using a script, but today, because of the circumstances and my conditions, I'm going to read directly from the notes that I wrote. So first of all, I want to say good morning. My name is Laurie Manzer. I'm a father, a husband, a community volunteer, someone similar to all of you here today. I'm also a veteran medically discharged after 18 years of service, a priority hire with the Public Service of Canada for 10 more years until a psychological condition forced me to retire. Of course, who wouldn't love to serve their country? I certainly didn't serve to become rich, nor try to have a stable home life. I love being part of a brother and sisterhood. Sandbagging in the West, ice storms in Quebec, helping our fellow Canadians in times of need. What I didn't realize is what would happen if I were injured or killed, and the fights I would have battling with Veteran Affairs. I have been navigating Veteran Affairs since 1999. I'm now old enough to fall under 3 Veteran Affairs Pension Acts, a confusing process that even I struggle with. An overwhelming process, short-staffed years later with overworked case managers. I could speak all day how our government, especially Veteran Affairs, has let us down, but I only have 5 minutes, so let's concentrate on some issues that need to be addressed. I have replaced work with donating my time, helping hundreds of veterans in my area, from filling out claims to arranging appointments, including cannabis education. I am in a unique situation where I get to listen to them and carry their concern forwards to our politicians, and finally here today in this press conference. One of the biggest issues of past, and it's still going on today, is the availability of cannabis. Veteran Affairs put a 3-gram payable cap and an exception process to prove if more than 3 grams a day is needed by veterans. The result that I witness day to day and actually feel myself is the increased stress, in turn causing increased pain levels and side effects returning with our PTSD patients that have to ration their cannabis daily to make their ends meet. Many veterans have come to my house in tears, believing their only choice is again to poison their bodies with painkillers and antipsychotic medication. Veteran Affairs policymakers, you are not in the streets and homes of these patients. This is a contract between the veteran and their doctor, not Veteran Affairs and the veteran. Let's stop labeling how many grams a day, how many dollars per year, and start measuring the metrics of what creates a great quality of life for our warriors. The argument of getting high has no bearing with my 3 grams a day of CBD usage with no THC. The exorbitant amounts of money that's been returned to the federal treasury earmarked for Veteran Affairs programs could have helped veterans obtain their cannabis and other important medical services. Just 2 days ago, I received an email from my licensed producer. It stated that the magical butter machine provides wounded veterans with an expensive tool to make their own oils and tinctures has now been canceled by the licensed producer. Why? Because the recreational laws so expertly thought out have now killed an important program to veterans that cost taxpayers absolutely $0. Who suffers? The veterans again. In fact, all medical users deserve better than this. As medical patients, we recently went through a tumultuous time trying to obtain this medical cannabis. I recently did a story with Global News in New Brunswick shortly after legalization. After many phone calls by myself and the reporter, we found out Health Canada was bottlenecking the process. New labeling, advertised rules, combined with not enough labs to do the extensive testing required by Health Canada, has some LPs with plenty of stock but no timely way to reach patients' hands. More government interference and more lack of planning. Mr. Trudeau, you like to blame everyone and never take responsibility yourself. I can personally say that I and the majority of my comrades have been more sick and stressed under your government than 10 years with Mr. Harper. You came out of the gate strong, promising why we wouldn't have to fight our government anymore. The charade is up. That's exactly why we are here today. Time to see some action, not rhetoric, not blaming past governments, and not throwing cash blindly at the problem. Try listening to those that are actually suffering. Thank you. Dr. Celeste?
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Laurie. My name is Dr. Celeste Thirlwell, and I have a background in neurosurgery and neuropsychiatry. And I've been working in the field of PTSD for over 20 years, first with first responders, then with refugees to Canada, and now more recently with veterans. I do this work to ensure that humanity remains humane. There is untold suffering that continues to happen in the veteran community for their partners, for their families, for our country as a whole. And I'm here today to share my observations as a clinician. Throughout history, the necessity of war has allowed people to think outside the box and implement innovative concepts, such as ultrasound in the World War II, GPS through the other war, and also bringing care to the front lines. The veterans of Canada are leading these innovations now. They have been failed by standard systems and protocols, and they are leading the surge, demanding that new and innovative medical techniques be developed. Such technique would be the implementation of optimized medical cannabis treatment. There has been an extensive observational experiment that has been going on for at least 3 years now through Veteran Affairs and the policymakers, which first allowed veterans to have higher dosages of medical cannabis, which optimized their care, allowing them to decrease their amount of opioids, to decrease polypharmacy, to decrease side effects of medications that had left them drooling on their couches, isolating in their homes, losing many years of their lives, feeling like zombies, to now claiming back their lives. A veteran once told me, medical cannabis was not my gateway drug. It was actually my gateway out of my basement. Unfortunately, this was the case before May 2017. With the new policy that Laurie mentioned, with the decrease to 3 grams medical cannabis, many of the veterans had their rug pulled out from underneath their feet yet again. They started isolating. They returned to many of the medications that gave them adverse side effects. They returned to being triggered. And more sadly, many of them once again lost their families, and we lost veterans to suicide. Now, with special letters that can be exemptioned so that they can have greater than 3 grams a day at optimized doses through very few specialists in Canada who are willing to prescribe marijuana, these veterans are fighting to reclaim their lives, reclaim their families, and once again function so that they can at least go out to dinner with friends and family, or possibly study once again. It is of vital importance for us to realize that we cannot solve these problems with the same thinking that created these problems. As Albert Einstein said, the paradigms of old are crumbling. The time of action is now, and Canada is poised to be an innovator in the treatment of PTSD, both here within Canada, but also globally, so that we can lead the way, not only with medical cannabis, but with other innovations that are helping to treat PTSD. From a medical perspective, the bottleneck is with education and research. There is a lack of will in the medical communities to allow doctors to push the envelope beyond antiquated protocols and treatments. We need support to be able to work with veterans to create the new paradigms. We need the political support and will and changes within Veteran Affairs to allow these to happen expeditiously. On the theater of war, a few moments' hesitation can mean the difference between life and death, and this is carried on long enough. Years and years of hesitation has meant the difference between life and death for veterans and their families. The innovations which we are pushing forward in the veteran community and which we have the potential to implement will not only mean improvement in health and care for them, but will trickle down to civilians as well as mankind in general. We must work together. There must be a will. There are doctors who are being persecuted for coming forward and speaking about the innovations or even trying to apply innovations in their practices. Not only innovations with medical cannabis, but neuroscience innovations, such as Dr. Khan innovating with BioFlex at Meditech International, and Dr. Linda Thompson, who is innovating with neurofeedback and PTSD members of the veteran community, both within Canada and the United States. These people need to be fostered. Other innovations need to be fostered. Doctors need to be working in an environment in which they no longer fear repercussions for working in tandem with their patients. I say that we as a medical community must come together with other allied health professionals and use the basic tried and true medical principles of stopping and listening, observing what is happening with our patients, working with them, communicating with them, and then having an open platform to enable these innovations to be implemented in a timely manner through the support of the political bodies. The time is now. Canada can be an innovator in this, and I hope that with this year of election, the political will shine forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thirlwell. Any questions? Thank you. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
You can all breathe now.
Good job, everybody.
Don't go anywhere. We'll take a picture.
Okay.
A real one this time, sorry.
Look at that, man. I'm almost dripping my hands.
Good job.